Yeah.
Hello, how are you?
Right, thank you.
Oh, this is two of these, so Mr. Martin. We need to recognise it.
Right, good afternoon everybody, welcome. My name is Michael Bothamley, I'm the Master of the Society of Motor Venturers, and it's my privilege and pleasure to chair this meeting today in the absence of the Lord Mayor on even more important civic duties. So welcome to you all. Safety information, no fire drill is planned.
That's right, nothing planned.
No emergency exits, how do we know?
I can turn right to the main door and then emergency exit.
Very good.
Very good.
So, any declarations of interest? No?
Cool.
Minutes of the last meeting. Are they a correct record? Does anybody have any errors they wish to modify? Can we approve them?
Aye.
There's nothing that's arising from them which isn't covered in the action tracker, I believe. Does anybody disagree with that? In which case, let's go through the action tracker, item 5. The issue around the resident installing a private driveway, and I gather anecdote informs me that further development is afoot. Who's got that? Ben, are you investigating that?
I have been, it's still with our legal team. There's nothing to report, unfortunately, that I can report. I'm just awaiting, further instructions. You're right to say that other things have happened.
Can you tell us what?
And planting of trees and, things. So yeah, awaiting instruction from somebody. The case is, open with the legal department.
So further encroachment, and we're now beyond the second anniversary of the issue first arising. I'm looking at the legal department to ask whether there's anything to add.
I do remember the issue being raised in the first instance, but I'm afraid it's not with my team, so I wasn't aware it's still ongoing, I'm afraid.
Well, I suppose we've got another 10 years before adverse possession, but it would be nice to have an answer after 2 years. So could those who have the ability to chase these things please do so? Anybody want to add anything?
Well, so Caroline's, Councillor Gooch's name's against it, so maybe have a notice to reminder on that.
Okay, thank you. The next item, I'm looking at Luke Mackenzie accessing SIL money.
Yeah, John and I had a meeting with one of the SIL officers a few weeks back, 3 or 4 weeks ago. It's now been added to the capital projects list to seek SIL, and just trying to follow up as further timings there are for outcomes on that. But it has been now added to the list to seek strategic SIL.
Okay. And any questions about any of that? No? Move on to an invitation for the GRT, a Gypsy Roma Traveller team, to attend a future meeting of the Downs Committee, perhaps with an Avon and Somerset Police rep.
I've had a chat with Ian and trying to work out to come to the next Events and Finance Committee.
Very good. Thank you. So the Events and Finance Committee will then report to the Downs Committee. And I don't think there's any rule about Downs Committee members who aren't already on the ENF joining that, if you particularly want to. So when you've got a date, perhaps you let us all know.
Yes.
Grand. Thank you. Anna, I think I saw your email being circulated to everybody about biodiversity loss.
I don't know if the same email was circulated. Steve and I had we had several emails going back and forth trying to work out which one it was. And so what I did is I've written a note at the beginning of the engagement report instead, which I hope covers what the email would have covered. I think that was perhaps more useful And it basically covers the same issues.
That's very helpful, and we can discuss it when we get to that.
Okay.
Thank you. So we tick that and knock it off.
Thank you.
Temporary uniform security patrols to be reintroduced for a month trial to mitigate bylaw breaches. A report back from you, Luke, for this meeting.
So we've had a chat with the neighbourhood enforcement, and they want a proposal of exactly what we're seeking, bylaws, what hours, how we're going to try and do that, because they'll come back with a costing as to what that will produce. So we can get some broad agreement as to the exact rules that we want to try and get enforced.
Excellent. Paula.
Well, I wonder if we're on just a bit of a mission of a folly on this. If we, you know, I mean, Luke's got a lot of things to do, and if he's directed onto this, I mean, it'd be interesting to ask John on this. I mean, so they come back and said, right, you put together a proposal with all the bylaws and the work and all the hours and everything. In the climate that we're in at the moment, with the parks budget the way it is, that's going to then get sent to John, who's going to go, sorry, there's no money.
Well, ultimately, Paul, yes, you're probably correct.
It's a lovely idea, but
It's,
maintenance of the aim might be the thing at the moment from my point of view, which is we've got lots of other things to be doing. Unless John is going to say that.
there will be a charge to the actual park service, and the state of the actual sort of Downing budget that will come back to park service to actually sort of meet. And at the moment, the current financial situation, we're going to find it very challenging to fund anything like that.
Look, I don't want to abandon this. There was a very strong groundswell of opinion when this was first discussed, this notion of a zero tolerance month to try to reset the public social contract, if you like, for Downs visitation. Unless we have it done, Anna's life will become more and more difficult. When we get to some later items, perhaps let's just keep it in mind for the time being.
Maybe about the Easter campaign and things.
Yeah, precisely, because this is what it's about, isn't it? I think.
Okay.
Yeah,
Can I just support you on that point? I don't think anyone was ever asking for a consistent all year round enforcement service. What we're talking about is a couple, 2 or 3 times during some days of action where we go there, enforce the bylaws, sets an example, maybe gets a bit of press. I don't think we're ever talking about a consistent service that's attached to the Downs all the time, but I think having no enforcement whatsoever just doesn't send the right message at all. But of course, I'm a big fan of those days of action. And I think they're easily resourced.
thank you, Guy. Any more on that? Yes, Robert.
Can I just add, Michael, and confirm what Councillor Dad has said, is that the original proposal did come from the Downs Advisory Panel, and it was in 2 parts. It was basically asking for a reinstatement of the out-of-hours security in the interim, just as Councillor Dad said. A blitz type of arrangement whereby we could say we could try and reset the Downs. I have to say, certainly things like parking on the Downs become almost the norm now. You know, the events now where people get to tube and find park. Probably didn't help that last week the Lord Mayor's car was photographed at Stratford Fair Park on the grass. I don't necessarily need to minute that for the Lord. So I think the point is, it's so slipping back in back, and you can see in today's report, it was just a brief paragraph, is an increasing groundswell of local opinion about general misbehaviour on the Downs and people just doing as they please. We don't do anything at all to try and redress the balance. I don't know where we're going to finish up.
Okay, thank you. Any more on that? In which case, the final item on the action tracker was Councillor Gooch's suggestion about a precept on the council tax being raised, and the finance manager has produced an answer to that, to the effect that council tax is subject to an upper limit set by central government of 2.99% in 24-25. Bristol City Council was given an additional power to raise an additional adult social care precept of a further 2% in 24-25, and there are no other opportunities to raise additional revenue via council tax precepts. The note then covers business improvement districts, but of course those are funded entirely by business ratepayers, and I think Councillor Gooch's intention was purely to charge those who voted for her. So, agenda item 5, I think it's done. Robert Vaughan, is there matters arising from the events and finance group?
Well, Councillor O'Rourke will correct me if I'm wrong. I was invited to chair this in your absence. I'm not sure there's a great deal. We're coming to it anyway, I think, in relation to proposals from North Car Park, which were considered at that meeting. We received information in relation to the proposed letting of the pitches to Westbury Park Foxes, 7 pitches, and at that time, because of the van dwellers who'd taken, well, the travellers who'd come onto the downs, there was a prejudice to the start of the season, which was flagged for the 7th of September, and you were anticipating then that it wouldn't be possible to give possession because the land wouldn't be safe even if the caravans disappeared. And I think we then also were concerned about the budgeting process, so we saw a deficit of 186,000. We were told that mitigation meetings were taking place. Then we understood had been asked to provide information, and that we would have a budget that would be ready for ENF on this meeting on the 23rd of October. But we wait and see what that is, whether it's a fait accompli, whatever it is, but it will be what it will be. So that's, I think, pretty much where we got to. And we noted what had come out of the DAF meeting, which was an enthusiasm for this information campaign to try and improve behaviours and people's approach to the use of the dam. So I think that was really where we got to. Or would you agree?
Yeah, I think, well, I mean, I think we spent quite a lot of time talking about that balance between the, you know, having events that obstruct and close the dams and annoy people through noise pollution, etc. And then also, you know, finding alternative ways of fundraising and
Yeah.
And I think also we did spend a lot of time talking about this campaign around Easter time, because it was a lot of social engineering, getting people to take their rubbish home and all this sort of thing. So,
and the concern in relation to the budgeting process is that we recognise the need to generate income. We recognise that those events actually then require resource in terms of restoring the land and dealing with the impact. And if you cut too much, then you reduce your capacity to do that, and thereby you reduce your capacity to generate income in the first place. So it's that balance, isn't it, that we were struggling with.
I think also now that John is here, I think one of the things that we were concerned about is that sense that, you know, we understand that you as head of parks are in a position where you have to make a set of proposals about where the mitigations and cuts are going to be. And I suppose in a way we did sort of think we would like to be able to be involved with that in some way, because I mean I know that Ben is obviously the expert here. He's feeding in the information to you, but in a way some areas of the committee would also like to have some sort of overview of element of evaluation, I suppose. Nobody wants to make any choices about where the cuts are going to come. But rather than just being presented with a fait accompli, it would be quite nice to just have an understanding of what your thinking is and where the night is going forward.
Yes. Okay, respond to that?
Yeah, please do.
Okay, yeah, so in terms of actually that, what we're doing is actually I'm preparing a paper at the moment, which is actually due to go to the actual sort of finance and, events and finance subcommittee, actually on the 23rd of October. So that I will conclude and actually bring that to that meeting so we can have a discussion around that. As you're aware, the council is actually in a situation where it needs to make some difficult choices in terms of actually managing its cost. Parks is not exempt to that. We have to do doing the same as everybody else to make sure we have a balanced budget for this financial year, but also making sure going into next financial year we can actually sort of reach a balanced budget. So we're having to look at actually sort of every aspect of spend, and that requires us to actually sort of look at the downs. The downs at the moment is forecasting. I'm looking at Kevin now. 165 is it, or
Yeah, 185.
185? Yeah. So we have got a pressure there. So I can't keep the actual sort of downs outside of this process. The downs we have to look at and see how we can actually get the downs to actually sort of balance. Obviously, income opportunities is one way to make it balanced, but at the moment, the pressures that I'm dealing with, I also have to look at actually some ways I can stem expenditure. So that's what we're doing at the moment, and that's what we'll be presented on the 23rd of October.
Thank you. Any more on that? In which case, let us move on to public forum. Mark Ashdown, I think, is not here, but he's put 2 questions to the committee, and he did ask for answers in time for the meeting, but until the meeting, I don't think we would have answers for him. So these are his 2 questions. The first is the committee willing to meet with the Bristol Tree Forum and other interested groups to discuss their statutory, I think he means the committee's statutory obligations under the Downs Act and Commons legislation, particularly in relation to the future of the North Car Park. That's question 1. Are we prepared to meet? And will we make a planning application for the North Car Park for question 2? Dealing with question 2 first, I don't believe a planning application is necessary. It's been a car park probably for more than 100 years. So it predates planning control. Nick, any?
I mean, I'm not a planning lawyer, but I mean, I would envisage that whoever, assuming we do proceed with a display car park there, then I'd imagine the operator, the onus would be on them to satisfy themselves that all necessary consents have been obtained, and to the extent that they were necessary, that they would apply for them themselves. I wouldn't envisage that would be something the committee itself would do.
Right, okay. Not for this committee, but something for the operator, to satisfy himself. As to whether we would be willing to meet Bristol Tree Forum and other interested groups, I suggest we might think about taking that question when we get to item 9, when we look at the proposal for the use of the North Car Park. Would people be happy to just postpone that for a couple of agenda items? Next public forum, Thomas Dawkins. Do we have Thomas Dawkins here? No. I'm sure we've all read Thomas Dawkins' very measured and reasonable and sensible submission. He raises 2 questions. Can the committee look to restrict Thunderworld's visits to once a year? Alternatively, if it must visit more than once, can we look for other sites? John, is there an answer to that?
Well, clearly, relocating, if you're suggesting relocating Thunderworld to another site outside of the Downs, and the Downs will benefit from that income stream. So that's the first thing to sort of say. Highly likely the parks would actually be one of the beneficiaries of that, but that would be going into the parks budget and not the actual sort of the Downs cost centre. So that would be the immediate impact it would have upon the actual Downs, which effectively overall would actually sort of increase the actual sort of pressure we've got within the actual sort of Downs budget. And probably what we'd be looking is actually to replace it with something else, ultimately, to make sure that the income, we need the income to actually make sure that we can have a balanced budget sort of going forward.
Yes, Kaz.
So why can't it be placed where Labels Bangkok is in the April slot?
That's a significantly smaller footprint. Thunderworld in its current form is only really going to work either where it is or down on the seawalls where we have the music events, which is an absolute no because of the need to provide football pitches in that area. So yeah, and across the road on the side where the circus goes and where Labels Bangkok, where that's a smaller site.
Any comments from anybody else?
Well, can I just ask, I mean, do we know that Thunderworld are going to want to come twice next year? Have we got a
That's the question.
an evaluation from them yet?
Not sure. Need to check the events.
They'll be coming,
Twice?
my understanding.
Yeah.
Right. Probably
Well,
now.
can I just, I mean, I think it's worth pointing out that this does highlight the dilemma that we have, which is we have a 444 acres that cost an awful lot of money to maintain them as the lovely resource that we have. And we, you know, there's no perfect way of raising that money. I have actually had more emails about Thunderworld and Massive Attack and things than I've had before. So whatever we've done this summer by, you know, cramming in these extra things is causing disturbance, and you know, it's not ideal. But equally, you know, if John is going to say we have 5 full-time members of staff on the Downs doing all the maintenance work that Ben needs doing, and I'm only going to give you the money for 2 in the future, we're going to have an erosion of the, I mean, you know, the land doesn't maintain itself. The money has to come from somewhere. There is noise pollution. It is annoying, and I think really what we have to recognise that we have to get the money from somewhere else, and I'm probably pointing towards the North Car Park, but I'm also pointing towards Luke's initiatives to bring funding streams in from elsewhere. And I think maybe what we need to do is we need to think about what we do in the immediate short term, but then having a better strategy in the medium and long term to get funding that is more compatible with what everybody in the city needs.
Kind of picking up on that, there's no, I have been in touch with Councillor O'Rourke and indeed with Luke. I've sat through some of these meetings, and the tension between events and amenity and the environment and the need to generate funding out with the City Council, which has so many calls upon its resources at the moment, and we know about those. And looking around, it seems to me that the Downs falls absolutely squarely within the Heritage Fund run by the Lottery Foundation. And they are looking for the opportunity between now and 2033 to back schemes that are promoting environmental landscape that is valued, cared for and sustained for everyone. So you'd say the Downs, absolutely slam dunk, isn't it? They want an overarching plan that ignites imagination. They apply 4 principles, which is saving heritage, promoting the environment and protecting the environment, inclusion, access and participation, and organisational sustainability, which translates across to governance. And it seems to me, and I'd invite this committee to encourage and endorse the preparation of a bid or a plan towards a bid, and I think the person who would lead that would be Luke. And looking at the Lottery Fund website and speaking to the Lottery Fund as I did back end of August, they will actually fund in year 1 the cost of preparing that plan. They will fund the development of the plan, and they will fund the implementation of the plan. And looking at examples, one is in South Gloucestershire's domain. Friends of Kingswood Park put together a plan, 2.6 million of an overall expenditure of 3.4 million. Came from the Lottery Fund. And speaking of the Lottery Fund, they say that the go-to, as far as they're concerned, is the Parks Foundation in Bournemouth and Christchurch, which has as its sort of strapline to enhance the parks by fundraising for improvements outside of what, I didn't choose to put it like that, outside of what Bournemouth Council will do. And they do that through a CIC, but there is nothing subject to being satisfied that there is appropriate governance in place. There is nothing in principle that would stop a grant being made to the benefit of the Downs under the auspices of the Downs Committee. So my feeling, so much of what we spend our time being concerned about and talking about is that tension, and we really need to pursue this so that we can satisfy ourselves that as a Downs Committee responsible for the Downs, we have pursued alternative elements of funding to the benefit of the population generally. So that's my ask. That's where I am.
So, I was surprised to see Thunderbolt coming back the second time this year. But now, being on this committee and looking at these papers, I can see there's a financial need for these events. And for me, I think there needs to be at some point a kind of a red line for this committee to think about in terms of how many events it's going to have. Because you just cannot keep on expanding event. I like things like Pride and depending on the concert, the time we can go to the concert. But there's also conflict between local residents as well. And you need to kind of set a boundary somewhere.
Well, could I make a proposal then, having listened to what Robert said, which is that we, maybe put it to a vote in the committee today, that we instruct Luke to begin preparations and exploratory about applying for this grant, and all of these things ancillary to that, which would probably be like, the 5-year plan and all these things that we need to get in place.
Sure.
Just to say that the Heritage Lottery, I know they'll fund the actual sort of phase in terms of actually developing them a bit, but there is actually work required from the authority to actually sort of find a resource and actually sort of prepare a bid. So that's something the council would have to actually sort of fund. It could be through Luke or somebody else. So you can actually get to a stage 1 approval. So when you get a stage 1 approval, then you can go through the full development of your actual stage 2 bid, bringing during that funding. We mentioned Bournemouth. We have a similar organisation in Bristol called Your Park.
Right.
They're a CI, well they're not a CIC, they're a charitable organisation now, which actually was developed by Bristol City Council. So one of my team actually developed Your Park, and it was called the Bristol Bath Parks Foundation, but it's now called Your Park. So they're there, and they do a lot of work for us in terms of actually on the similar lines to what Bournemouth does in terms of actually looking at initiative funding they can actually bring in that the council can access. Obviously the council can access Heritage Lottery funding. So we'd have to take that away and look at actually sort of, I'm not saying it's not eligible, but I would need to understand exactly sort of how much resource that's required. If we were going to go down that route, I couldn't just instruct that because I would have to get go through a process of getting the actual sort of approach to actually sort of to the funders to actually go through a committee process. I'd have to get that done. I can't just go off and actually sort of start seeking actually funding, because otherwise the council would have every sort of service of the council trying to sort of seek different funding, which could be in conflict to actually other aspects. So I just need to make sure it's clear that what we're doing is not contrary to what somebody else is doing. I'm not saying it is, because there's going to be limited scope for it, but I just need to make sure I've got the actual processes in place and making sure that is it just going to be Luke's time, or is it going to be some Kevin's time, some of other people's time to actually pull that initial application together, because the initial application is not funded by the Heritage Lottery. The stage 1 application will be funded by them.
I hear what you say. And clearly somebody needs to be engaged in the initial preparation. I don't want to in any way, shape or form bypass or undermine this committee, which is why I raise it here. There is clearly, and there is so much, I think, one, goodwill, and two, elements of this that exist already, whether it's through Anna's work or through FODAG or DAP or whoever it might be, the management plans and so on. It's the overarching bit, and then being able to say, we want to pursue this. But I think that it would be, and I in my mind was concerned that sort of bringing this here, that there would be, or if you like, you've alluded to it, some competing interests, if you like, in terms of one resource and two, actually application itself. But of course, this committee is charged with and has a responsibility towards the dams. And that's my concern, to get this moving and get it off on the right foot. But hear what you say.
I think, I'm sure Robert's volunteering time and brain power to help as well. I will happily do that, so it doesn't interfere on council officers' time if needs be. I previously raised the money to buy the Bristol West Sports Ground and converted it back in 2013. So I think there's other support available. We just
Yeah, and I don't agree, and I'm not trying to sort of, dampen that down, but I think we need to look at every opportunity for funding possible. We need to explore every avenue, and we just need to make sure that there are the right resources. I don't want to sort of pass something on to Luke thinking he's got no chance of delivering.
No,
So I just want to make sure that I'm managing expectations here, and then we just need to understand, is it all capital, or can that capital be using opportunities to generate more income, more revenue streams? We just need to get our head around that and just really look at it in a little bit more detail before I just say to Luke, here we go, doing that one for me.
John, if I forgive me, I think what I was proposing was those exploratory stages. So what I would think is if the committee today would give their approval to begin those exploratory stages, and then it could come back with more time on the next meeting. Because this has just been sort of added in a bit here today. I think it needs more thorough investigation. That would give Luke, 6 weeks or whatever to.
And we can look, as I say, I'm very happy to use what time available to convening and supporting that process.
So does anybody not support that? Or does anybody wish to say anything for or against it? Thank you. So, approved.
Can I just say one thing? If we get this money and we get this plan in place, we've still got that problem on an annual basis of trying to raise, I would expect we're still going to raise some money. So there's still going to be this conflict between events and not having events. And I suppose the only way in which you could overcome that is if we were to somehow find an endowment that would put in place that would cover the cost of running the downs. But that's probably unrealistic. So we're going to have to accept that there are going to be some events, but it may allow us to dilute and reduce the number.
Well, I just say, when we talk about events, some of the events are positive. And where does it hit the tipping point? And I think it'll hit a tipping point with Massive Attack and then forward to next weekend. But we want to, I always use this phrase, curate a programme of events on the downs to bring people up there. And that's bringing people up for Pride, bringing people up for music concerts, foodie festivals. There are things that are positive enhancements of that space. It's only when we get to the stage where we're thinking we have to have Thunderbolt twice in 1 year because we need the money, that's when it becomes a negative thing. So I think, if we can work within a grant structure, that would give us maybe enabling funds to put in place other things that might be income generation, but also add amenity at the same time. That'd be a perfect world, wouldn't it? And then we could still have a programme over the year, bring people up onto the downs, and then manage the sort of the amenity of people on the downs and also those people living around the downs.
Yeah.
I think this money might do that.
If I can be permitted to make one point from the chair, it's worth remembering there are lots of people in Greater Bristol, perhaps they don't all live around the downs, but there are lots of people in Bristol who love going to Thunderbolt.
Yeah.
And are very delighted that it's here twice a year. And we have got to remember that the downs is for everybody. That above all is our mission. Steve, you were trying to tell me something I perhaps should have done? And in this process, I'm always abashed, particularly when people who put in public forum statements aren't here. I'm always abashed that nothing comes out of it. Presumably, one aspect of the kind of work that you're suggesting, Robert, is that people like Thomas Dawkins will be invited to feed in, because it does have to be fully consulted, doesn't it?
Subject to all the wise counsel of course, there are a whole range of users, local residents, others, who should be involved in that process.
Now, the next item of public forum business is Simon Robertshaw's statement. Good. You can have a couple of minutes, if you'd like, just to draw out some key points. You must take it that we've all read your statement.
Yeah, I can summarise it. It's probably a little bit inarticulate, so apologies for my grammar in that draft. But my response, my feed-in comments came from a negative position, because I went for a run one day and then ran past the Travellers site, and then ran past Massive Attack, and then ran past the camper vans, and I felt like I'd been surrounded by urban mess for the whole run. So that was, but I had some great responses from the members and from Steve as well, so that was great. So it sort of laid from my initial concerns, which left the sort of residual issue that effectively the council and the Downs Committee are faced with legislate in relation to the two things of travellers, travellers being mobile home users and travellers in the traditional sense, you're faced with the legislative problems, and in that context I just wonder whether the members were lobbying the MPs for legislative change, because many landholders up and down the country are regularly faced with eight grand bills and a 2-month delay with trying to resolve a problem with unauthorised camping, and I think that's a legitimate issue. And it is about that, I think you were talking about a contract of behaviour patterns, and I think it sort of breaches that quite substantially, really. I mean, clearly the council has responsibility in relation to traveller sites and providing appropriate sites, but that's you know, not playing by the rules in that context. And similarly, there was issues with the mobile home people who are living there. I mean, I don't dispute there's a sort of housing issue, but ultimately I do think it's public amenity space that's been taken for private amenity gain, and I don't think that's the right moral choice, really. I think it's the right good thing. So it was just a question of whether you were lobbying, and that's the thing. That was the first question, whether you were lobbying for that political change. And the second point was around conscious that you've got a substantial amount of public benefit and a hell of a lot of competing interests with revenues and costs coming in. You know, I work for an organisation that regularly tries to plan infrastructure across substantial land holdings, and master planning is the industry standard the way you do that, which is a visual process of planning and laying out all your constraints and then mapping use through time and competing and conflicting interests to try to reach some sort of equilibrium, if you like. I mean, I think it's phenomenally useful for a Heritage Lottery Fund application, obviously, but in itself it's a useful exercise anyway, because visually seeing things is different to conversations and textual discussion of issues. So I think a master planning process would be a phenomenal process to go through the Downs. And actually I think it would make people really, Bristolians, I mean I grew up in Henbury, I live in Cotton now, but I think it would really get Bristolians to visually connect with the issues and the tensions that you're experiencing and understand them. And I think a lot of the problem is people maybe, in terms of public concern, is that they don't understand. So in order to mentally engage people, I think a master planning process would be an excellent tool to do. There are issues with access for all, widths of paths, cafe facilities and things like that, just general infrastructure issues that I think would usefully be flushed out by that process as well.
Are you offering your services?
Sorry?
Are you offering your services?
Well, I'd happily volunteer on anything, yeah. I'd be litter pitting or anything, yeah. But I think it's the Downs is a great resource. Has been since I was a kid, and is now. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Got his name.
Yeah.
Simon, thank you very much, Simon. So Simon's two questions. The first one is really just for councillor members of this committee. If you think that legislation and guidance needs changing, you may not, are you lobbying for this? Do you have anything to say to that?
I might be a little bit out of date on this, but I know that previously in the council, some councillors brought forward motions to ask us to write to London to ask for trespass to be criminalised as a way of stopping travellers. And I'm afraid I had a negative response to that, because I just think that it's a hammer to crack a nut, and if you criminalise trespass, we all want to go for walks, don't we? We all want to perhaps not necessarily deliberately trespass, but we could be opening people up to all sorts of accusations and criminal activities that we didn't really want to think that we're going to have to do. It's a very complicated issue. I actually had a long conversation with some friends of mine on the weekend. I mean, you hear from my accent, I'm Irish. Most travellers are Irish. We have Irish travellers. We have a big issue with Irish travellers in Ireland. And, in many ways, they are a much discriminated against group of people. And they have a culture and a value that they live by, and whether we like it or not. I mean, I don't think we can be stamping out people's cultures, and if their culture is to travel in the summer, I think the best and the first and most preferable way would be to have more sites for them to be able to stop at. And I think that's so I don't think it needs legislation. I think it needs just more.
I suppose there's just that time. There's just that 2 month time delay and the £8 worth of cost, and it's from the minority that don't play by the rules and disabuse the means
Yes.
of the community space.
And I do think that, you know, but also I think we need to learn from what happens. So it actually cost nearly 10 grand to move I think it was the June encampment, the large encampment. The cost of that eviction was £10,000, and they moved to other Eastville, they just moved to 2 other parks. And they were only going to stay for 2 more days because they were going to go to they were going to go up to Cumbria to the fair. So I think we need to be pragmatic about it as well.
Okay.
Can I add something to
Anna,
Paula's, just a comment on that? I felt that there were fewer travelling communities this year, and I might be totally wrong about on that, but my feeling was there were slightly fewer than last year, and I did wonder whether if one group is removed hastily, whether that filters down through to other travelling communities who then might not come to the site. I have no idea if that's the case, but it did cross my mind.
It seemed unlikely from what happened because we had a couple of encampments that were subject to different powers early on in the summer and were removed really swiftly. It appears that word didn't get through because in the latter end of the summer we had 2 longer encampments. So
you don't think there were fewer than last year, for example? It felt to me there were fewer.
Maybe fractionally, but still pretty busy.
It's just a thought I had,
Unfortunately.
that whether there was a filtering process of knowledge that goes...
You'd have to speak to the community, I suppose, to fully know that.
Yeah.
Robert.
Yeah, that's only just a comment, Chair. I did ask some questions about the Travel Roma community, the Travel Roma team, about possession order for this year, and the answer I got back, well, I think about how long will it take to get the possession order listed on the day that they arrive. It could take anything from 3 to 4 weeks time we get it through the courts. So, well, what's the point of applying for possession order? They're not going to be here for 3 or 4 weeks. He said, well, that's the process we have to go through. I also asked questions about the amount of fly tip that was left. And we have documentary evidence, if not actual evidence, that unless we actually see somebody tipping a wagon full of rubbish onto the ground, we won't make prosecution. Prosecution won't be followed. So I think we're pretty much up against it. The travellers are always have been well versed in how to manage their own activities, and they take full advantage of all the lax procedures that the city council seem to have in place. The police don't seem to be interested either.
Thank you, Robert. Simon's other point was to do with master planning, and I think that might be covered by the exercise that you're...
Yeah, we'll proceed. Right, that's right. Subject to coming back here and getting this number.
So, Simon, thank you for your contribution, and I think you'll probably be hearing from us further.
We will.
Be careful what you wish for.
I do genuinely think that it might be very useful for you, and certainly very useful for DAP, if you came to a meeting and talked about your ideas more. I sit on the DAP panel as well. Robert chairs it. And it's a good conduit for that. Its purpose is to be a conduit for the public. So, thank you.
Right. Let's move on to Chiz, Christopher Jeffries.
Right, thank you. As the Chair has just indicated, I'm here to represent the Clifton and Hopwell's Improvement Society and to remind the committee that in April we sent a letter to the Master of the Merchant Venturers, copied to the Chair of the Downs Committee, about the future of the North Car Park. The letter was in support of the arguments put forward by Downs people and the Bristol Tree Forum, which highlighted the likely consequences of any attempt to circumvent the terms of the undertaking given to the High Court in 2021. As far as we can see, that letter was largely ignored. It's certainly rather remarkable, it seems to us, that the report before the committee from Luke Mackenzie fails to make reference to either that letter or the very detailed letter from Downs for People. And as far as the suggestion is concerned that the committee may rely on the 1982 County of Avon Act in determining the way forward, the legal advice which Chiz has received disputes this, which is why we have put in the public forum statement which is before you, in order to emphasise the possible serious consequences of any breach of the court undertaking in terms of the possibility of contempt of court proceedings. So that really is just a summary of the position that we wanted to reiterate.
Thank you, Christopher. And what I'd like to suggest, as I did in respect to the Bristol Tree Forum submission, perhaps we could take this for discussion when we're on to agenda item 9 to which it relates. Thank you. So is there anybody here from Downs for People? We've had their very full statement, so we'll again take that as a discussion item under agenda item 9. Finally, Dominic Hogg and Rita Jelinski have put in a public forum statement. Are either of them here? I don't think so. Again, for the record, I think we can take it, we've all read it and sympathise with it. The writers finish by hoping that the committee will take these comments seriously and plan future events accordingly. And I think all we will say is that we'll take the comments into this consultation process that's been talked about.
Chair, I just wonder on this issue of the noise pollution. I'm aware from emails to do with the massive attack gig and the politicisation of that there may be a review of the terms of events. And I wonder whether some of the regulations quoted around noise limits in here couldn't also then be reflected in any revision of that future events agreement. And I should say, I do know Dominic Hogg, but I have not spoken to him on this issue, so I would say whether it came from any other resident.
John, is that for you?
It'll be through Jonathan Martin's team, so Harriet comes here, so we have to, they manage the actual events for the council as a whole, and so they sort of do it for the Downs and do it for the park, so we'd have to pick that with actually sort of Harriet and actually sort of Jonathan Martin to see how the actual sort of details of the actual agreement licence could actually be amended to reflect that.
If I understand it, there's going to be amendments that potentially look at controlling or having some clawback if events are politicised, and there's opportunities that we in
So can we pass that on to Harriet? Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Is there a problem with events being politicised?
There's been a complaint, I think, probably for...
Yeah, there was the massive attack concert.
Yeah. What was it?
There are some problems with the over-politicisation of some of our events. If it results in, as a response, we get loads of, pro the other side graffiti on footpaths, on the steel shield. So if it provokes like counter messaging that we have to clear up, then I guess that's an issue. Which is what's happened. We've had to jet off.
I think
pro is ready to graffiti as much as so.
Explicitly in this case, I think there was a member of the Jewish community who was a relative of people who were killed in the terrorist attacks in Israel last year with Palestinian flags right outside their home and things, which is the kind of issue that's, I think, maybe needing discussion.
It's the kind of issue that provokes, the other side's graffiti in response, so that's why it can be an issue for us in terms of path upkeep. We don't get a load of extra work from it.
Well, I got that email, and I didn't know prior to, at what point did it come, came to this committee, make any decision about whether there would be, a Palestinian, I don't understand exactly what I think there's some panels and some, tables and stalls and things and flags flying. It's just something that flew below the radar with me. I don't think we ever got any chance to talk about it, but I think maybe it is something that we do need to take a point on in the future, because, it's, if you just have partisan things happening, it doesn't seem like a good idea for it to be politicised at all, to me.
Rob?
I bring up the instance where, I don't know if you remember this, but there was a band called Rage Against the Machine who got told by BBC Radio not to use the swear words in their lyrics live on the BBC, and then of course used the swear words live on the BBC lyrics because the swear words I won't do what you tell me. So I think by bringing it and raising it up to a level which means that it becomes a politicised issue, you just further create this pattern where we're just talking about it more and more, and it becomes more and more a vicious circle rather than a virtuous circle. That would be my concern with this kind of thing, is people have a right to take different views on that, obviously. But I don't think it's very wise to go over the top on how
I think that's good advice. Anna and then Kaz.
Sorry, I was interested to know, did anyone have any idea how political that concert was going to be?
I think anybody who knows anything about maths knows
it was
not surprised, but
extremely
it's like
political. The entire evening.
Yeah.
I mean, I was aware that people who did not support that view or might feel quite threatened, actually. That was my feeling there, was that there could be people in that arena who felt quite threatened, personally. But I was interested to know whether there had been any inkling
No,
that was going to take that.
The Team Love terms and conditions are entirely clear, and that there shouldn't be flag waving and the rest. Because I know that because I've seen them. I think our concern as a Downs committee is probably simply that A, the Downs is for everybody, and B, we need to keep people safe. I'd have thought that would be pretty non-contentious. Kaz, you have something to say?
Well, I was going to say exactly the same. The damage for everybody. I think the issue here is the amplification of sound. I had an issue as a new councillor in Cycling, where there was an event being put on to raise money for the ranch, and one thing that happened was that sound was travelling, music was travelling with offensive lyrics, swearing, and people were hearing that from quite a distance away. So I think there needs to be some maybe thought to how sound travels and the communities that be impacted.
Yeah, I was just going to say the specific complaint was about the blatant pro-Palestinian content of the whole event. That's what the lady was actually complaining about. I've actually been copied into a response from Team Love to that lady, and they were very apologetic, and they did refund the money as well. I think it's to do with the terms and conditions. One of the things she said that when the Palestinian flags were being flown, she complained to security. If these flags shouldn't be flown, it's whipping up the crowd, and it's going to potentially cause a problem, and she was ignored basically. It said they're not going to stop the flag waving in case it escalates the situation that may cause a further problem. And obviously she won't be very happy about that. It's one of the things that we've contemplated out into the DAP agenda is the way we manage events on the Downs. Not just the content of events, but things like we talked about frequency of events, different types of events, and charging for events. So that may well be some recommendations will come from the next DAP panel meeting as well.
Thank you. We would be very pleased to hear from the DAP. Any more from anybody on that? In which case we'll move on to agenda item 8, which is your report, Robert. What I'd like to ask you, Robert, is to take this as read, because it contains 4 quite important recommendations, which I think we would like to spend a bit of time talking about. So your item 1, which is that there should be an initiative to regain a green flag award for the Downs. Do you want to say anything just to position this?
Yeah, it's really at this stage, to look at the levels of interest for recovering reinstating green flag status for the Downs, which the report states we did achieve in 2007, and then we subsequently lost. It's a bit of a personal ambition for me, really, to see that green flag fly again up by the cafe. And as you'll also see in the report, we've still got a flagpole without its flag. So it's really to gauge the level of interest and to seek the support of this committee. It will need all parties, to achieve success, it will need all parties really to be signed up to this, which will include, obviously, Friends of the Downs Advisory Panel, the Avon Lords and Wildlife Trust, the Parks Department, and of course the Downs Committee themselves will be critical to the application. Back in 2007, they were the prime movers. The Downs Committee were the prime movers to achieving green flag. Just to conclude on item 1, I believe we've got a good chance of meeting the criteria, even the things that perhaps are not so keen about the Downs at the moment. The green flag judges will see that they're being managed, or attempts are being made to manage and improve. So really it's just item 1 is to seek approval from the Downs Committee.
Thank you, Robert. So the recommendation is that the Downs Committee commits to and supports an application led by the DAP to recover green flag status for the Downs.
Yeah, I'm very happy to support the aspiration. I mentioned to Robert as we arrived, is this better done now as an initiative in itself, or is it better being a proof point that supports a future grant application, i.e. we're after the funds in order to, and I can't judge whether it's better to have it, I think it'd be helpful in our public, or whether it's one of the outcomes we then pitch to potential funders. So no question of the aspiration, it's more I think the tactics of
Any other comments?
I agree. That's right.
So we support the aspiration, and we look at the feasibility of getting it and building into this wider piece of strategic planning.
If the committee are happy, I can make some exploratory talk to the green flag judges or the organisation and see where it goes next.
Ben, have you got any concerns about that?
Ben, you love it.
I remember well how much extra and hard work was put in by Robert's team, i.e. myself and others at the time, and I wonder how that fits in with any, Jonathan's potential paper still to come. I would be nervous about resource level dropping, and it doesn't seem to work, that equation.
Thank you. Any more on that?
Yeah, just to say, I haven't dealt with green flag for a number of years. It's one of the things that lots of councils I worked for previously just dropped because they couldn't afford to do it, couldn't afford to actually manage and maintain the actual management plan. And I know Bristol had a number as well, about a few years ago. So the criteria has changed. I'm not sure what the criteria has changed to, but it's changed quite significantly anyway since green flag was launched a number of years ago. So I think we'd have to look at the actual criteria, and again, it comes back understanding exactly the resource required. But I think it could be, it makes sense to incorporate it in the actual wider pieces where we're going to look at around the heritage stuff, because sometimes that will be one of the outcomes they ask for, actually to achieve green flag status. So that could go hand in hand with that.
Okay, thank you.
Can I add something?
Please.
Just that to get the public on board sometimes, having an aspiration can work wonders. Getting the public on board in their belief and values that this is how we look after this site and how we manage this site. And instead of it being quite often a negative conversation, it can be a positive conversation if you're aspiring towards something. So from a public point of view for Bristol, potentially it could be a positive thing.
Makes sense. Thank you.
And I just reassure Ben that I mean, obviously I realise how much hard work it did take for us to achieve green flag status the first time round. That's only one of the criteria. The other things that, like Alice just mentioned, public involvement are all parts of the criteria. And I think probably if there's 4, 5, 6 criteria that we will meet, 5 of the 6 we're pretty close.
It's good to hear, thank you, Robert. Your recommendation too is that this committee asks the Public Rights of Way team to reinstate to an acceptable standard the gully, footpath and steps. Any concerns about that? No? We're happy to make that recommendation. Cliff edge fencing is item 3. The recommendation is that we urgently consider exploring options to extend the height of the cliff edge fence and also look to install warning signs and information panels about the help available for those experiencing suicidal thoughts, appropriate to seek advice from organisations like Samaritans and the Suspension Bridge. Ben, I think this is on your to-do list already, isn't it?
Certainly the signage is something in another forum that I attend, and the Samaritans are present, etc. That we're looking at some new signage. The raising the height of some portions of our fencing around the cliff tops is something that I've been talking about, the police have been talking about, this committee's been hearing about for a number of years. I think everyone agrees it needs to happen, but it's expensive.
2 things. One is I did write to one of the officers in Bristol City Council in charge of bridges and structures and things like that, and made them aware of the request, and they said that they would put it on a list. But then this morning I met with the bridge master from the Suspension Bridge, and she said, she brought this up of her own volition, that there's another organisation called the Avon Gorge, something or other name that I've never really heard before, and that they're looking to raise these bits of fences where it's gone down. So, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. We need to get joined up on this. So, if you like, I can take it as an action that I will go back to the bridge master and say, who exactly are these people? What exactly is happening? And try and see if we can just sort of corral all the bits of information.
Yes, good start.
Okay, and keep Robert in the loop, please. Thank you. Any more on that one? So then the 4th recommendation was to support the FODAC-led initiative to encourage local companies to take part in corporate work days. Robert, anything you want to say about this?
It's something that FODAC have been working on, but really we want the committee to endorse it, make sure the committee is happy with what we're doing, because we're looking to try and expand it as well. It's only today, I think Alan passed on some information from Freshers there, I think, the RAS squadron would like people to volunteer and work on the dam. Of course, it's not just a case of 20 people walking out and doing some work. It has to be carefully organised and structured. We need to make sure things like health and safety are attended to, and we need to make sure that we coordinate and agree any work with Ben and his team. I recollect in my days on the dams that although it's great having these volunteers, sometimes they can be more trouble than they're worth.
Let's not with it.
But we do, that's maybe an element of managing. But hopefully the Friends of the Downs will be able to manage that. And since the other thing I mentioned, that there may be members on this Downs committee that are involved with companies that might also like to take advantage of a corporate work day to, shall we say, polish their credentials.
Thank you. Thank you, Robert. Yes, David.
Just add something to that. I think I'm retired now. I used to be a lawyer, and when the Bribery Act came in, a lot of the activity that people like professional people, etc., got involved in was cut off because you weren't allowed to spend money, etc., etc. And a lot of the things that we did by way of substitute was, for instance, we went to the park with another organisation, firm accountants, and we painted 3 or 4 rooms, and it was really, really successful.
Yeah.
So I think what you're suggesting is well organised and well planned will get a really strong take-up.
So I think all this committee is being asked to do is to offer our support, which I imagine we do enthusiastically. Is that correct? Okay, good. Thank you, Robert, and thank you finally for your support to progress the bringing back into use of the North Car Park, which brings us neatly onto item 9. Luke, do you need to speak to this, or should we just consider the papers before us?
If you want to go through the paper and you can, if there's any questions.
Well, I don't think we need to go through the paper point by point, because it's, I'm sure we've all read it. Nick, do you have anything to say? Because you've been involved in the legal advice component of this, haven't you?
Yeah, did you want me to pick up some of the issues that were raised in the public forum?
Well, I think the first thing, particularly to Christopher's concern, that the earlier letters from various people haven't been considered. Is it right that you have seen them all?
Sorry?
I was asking Nick from the legal department whether the legal department process had seen the letters to which you referred in your submission.
I've certainly seen a letter, quite a lengthy letter from
Yeah.
people.
So I'm pretty certain we sent that letter to the legal team here and that it has been considered. I think the only other sort of point of principle that I'd make on behalf of all of this committee is that it is absolutely not our purpose to bring the North Cart back into use so people can park there and use it for non-downs activities. That is absolutely not our purpose. A variety of the public statements seem to indicate that somehow that must be the case, but it isn't. The recommendation of this paper is that we approve the proposal that the North Car Park be reopened for pay and display, and we authorise the council to select and enter into an agreement with a commercial provider. Kai and then Kaz.
Yeah, can I just ask, because obviously the contention is that for non-downs use, isn't it? That seems to be what is causing a lot of the trouble and what we've previously agreed not to do. So is there some form of signage or system that we need to include so we're clear that the car park is only for downs use? Is there any case law around that in terms of what that looks like, in terms of what we should be providing on site to meet that condition?
I'm not aware of any case law, but I mean obviously that was referenced in the court order in terms of signage, I believe. And yeah, so that would be the intention, to make it clear that car park was to be down to users.
So it would be very difficult to enforce that, wouldn't it? So is there a legal emphasis on us to say how we might enforce that, or differentiate between people using the car park for that legitimate purpose against those that are using it for a non-legitimate purpose?
I'm not aware of any case in that regard. I think the bottom line is that, as you alluded to at the start of that question, it's I'm not sure what any enforcement mechanism would look like, other than signage to make clear that's the purpose of what the car park would be used for.
I mean, that's why the order is drafted in the terms.
Because the only thing I'm going to be clear, previously we've pretty much lost £400,000 that we defended the claim. I just want to be sure that what we're proposing to do we're on a sound footing.
In section 4 of the order, where it says that, which is part of this pack, on page 21, section 4 deals with the order does not impose any obligations on either of the defendants to, and then it sets out that that's not our obligation, is to make clear what the car park's purpose and use is.
So if someone's using it for a non-legitimate purpose, and it's not for us to act in any way.
We're not obliged to answer the question, guys.
Okay.
That's what the order says, and we're not obliged to actively enforce
So as long as we set out the terms of use for the car park, if someone's in breach of that, then we don't have to take any action. We've met our obligation there, would you say?
Well, we've met our obligations under the order. I think it's really important that we act in good faith. This court order was carefully negotiated with Downs for people in good faith, certainly good faith on our part. And the key thing is, what's our purpose in reopening this car park? And then how do we take reasonable steps to make sure that it's not abused?
Okay, and that's what I'm checking that we're confident that we are taking reasonable steps.
It seems
the last thing I want is someone to engineer a challenge, so they might get a friend to turn up and then go to the shops around the corner and then take evidence from that person to say, I've parked here, I have no intention of going to the Downs. They then go around the corner to a shop, and then Downs for people bring a challenge saying that the car park is being used for non-Downs purposes. So I just want to be, and even if they do bring a challenge, then that costs us money to defend it, even if it's a spurious challenge.
I mean, ultimately, I suppose there's legal advice is provided to the committee. The view is, the legal advice is that this would not be setting up for you paid straight car park would not be a breach of the court order. It's then the prerogative of the committee to take a view on based on the legal advice or not based on the legal advice, either way. But you haven't been given the legal advice whether or not to follow it. And it's of course down to people's prerogative as to have a different view, and it's what actions they take. You can't control what happens after that, I would say.
I think we know what's going to happen, don't we? So we need to be watertight.
I mean, there isn't going to be any case law on this. It'll always be sort of fact-specific, won't it? So I hear what's said. I wasn't involved in any part of the earlier proceedings, and I think my own view of it would be that both the Act that's referred to, so the County of Avon Act, and the order that was drawn assist us and support us in the use of it. If we contrived then to provide access that was effectively of a type that meant that people who were not using the Downs would find it extremely convenient, we would have a problem. But if we actually ensure that the terms and conditions for its use in terms of the hours, the costing, and so on and so forth are consistent with that being for the use of those resorting to the Downs, as I think the word is resorting, then I would have thought, going back to good faith, what are we doing? We can be as confident as we can be. But others will comment, others will have a view.
I agree with that. When we look at clause 4, paragraph 4, couldn't be clearer. But you cannot stop people like that, so people instigating proceedings, and we've got no control over them as third party. But if you look at that wording, it's very difficult to understand how it could be worded any clearer.
So which one are you talking about? Clause 4?
Right, if you look at the order, it does not impose any obligation.
Page 21 is that.
Page 21.
Yeah.
Check purpose or purposes to which any person parks, has parked or will park in the Downs, including maybe marked car park and the car park, or check whether those in any vehicle so parked have undertaken or undertaken and will undertake any Downs activity.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't get any clearer than that. So, but we've got no control over the parties and it's up to them what they do. But I agree with what was said.
And I think, Rob, just to remind you of the purpose, all being well, very soon the Downs hub will open, right next door to the North Car Park, to which school children from all over the city will be brought to walk around the Downs with Anna and be educated. We also want to increase broader visitation from across Bristol, while at the same time we've already resolved to ask the council to bring in short-term pay and display on the other Downs roads and ultimately to close Circular Road. So to safeguard the future use of the dams, the North Car Park is a critical part of the jigsaw, and preserving it as a car park is the key purpose behind this decision.
In your screen, I was going to ask about the sort of fourth point in the Downs People statement about whether alternative uses have been considered. Sorry, I realised I jumped in. Were you going to say something?
No, carry on.
Is that right? Just has that been sort of percolated? Have you sort of thought through any of the particular uses for this space that could be revenue raising? Because obviously, clearly, I think everyone knows this is a revenue raising thing. We need to have some more income against the dams.
We're also looking to have potentially a concession on part of the car park, yes, but in terms of wider, we've looked at what's currently proposed where the cafes are. We get income from both Bristol Student Football League, from the Downs Football Leagues, we get income from the events, and there's a lack of parking up on the parallel parking that's available up there. And this is to provide an offering as there are across many parts in Bristol, where the council is able to provide support the uses on the downs, and that's what we're seeking to do.
We've got a specific cost that will be charged, or is that not? We're not at that point yet. That you know how much each raise.
The actual tariffs are currently being discussed at the moment, but they're broadly going to be in line with probably Long Ashton and Blaze.
I'm sorry, there were other points. So Kaz and then Paul.
I want to start with a quick question concerning the statement from Downs People Bank. Maximum penalties imprisonment for committee members if they breach consent. That just concerned me. I just want to check up the lawyer.
My hand up has not been a litigation lawyer, so I can't comment on that. I mean, I understand that to be the case in terms of obviously what we found to be in contempt of court, but obviously the legal advice here is that there wouldn't be any question of the order would be complied with. There's nothing suggested in the report in terms of bringing the car park into use for that regard that would risk that. But
it's not the last time you've seen on the committee. I just expand and maybe get some viewpoints out. I was quite pleased to hear in response to Rob's question that there are a hub. Didn't realise there was going to be a hub. So it's actually important to sort of have a reason for people to visit that area. You're going to start charging. I am fundamentally against myself parking on the downs. I've been using the downs for 30, 40 years. It just doesn't seem right to me, but there you go. We can discuss that at a future time. And I kind of see what Kyle was saying about litigation and the potential cost of that and wasting council money. But we've got so many problems in this city in terms of trying to sort of get good housing for people. You reward councillors in our respective boards. I wouldn't want to see that money get wasted on these sort of things.
Good. Thank you, Kaz. Paula, did you have?
Yeah, a couple of points, if you will indulge me. The first one is probably coming on from what you were saying there, but not parking on the downs. And Downs people wanted to stop parking on Ladies Mile. That was their mission. And at least 3 members of Downs people have told me privately that this North Car Park was, they've all used the phrase, collateral damage. They never asked to stop parking there, but there's an element of glee because being able to achieve that, and they wanted to do that. But I must remind people that when you look at the local plan, the North Car Park is not a designated open space. It's not a green. It's not viewed across the city as a green space because it's been tarmac and a car park or whatever that surface is for so many years that people just expect it to be that. And I think that's a really valid point because it's on the other side of the road. It's not part of what generally people consider the Downs. You asked about the vision that people would have for these, and of course, when you paint a vision, as Robert does, of a beautiful, promenade of trees and a wildlife swathes of wildlife, we'd all really like that. It'd be lovely. There's no money to do it, and so if you stop being a car park, you're defunding the basic services on the Downs that John is telling us that we have to make cuts to. So, you know, it's a double whammy to try to not mess with the car park. Also, we talk about shops. I'm a Clifton councillor. I can't even persuade people coming to the shops to go park in Golden Avenue, which is only just like 2 streets down from the actual shops in the village, because that's seen as too far to walk. I don't think this is going to be a car park where people are going to park and go to the shops. We have to think about the recommendation. Those who are familiar with this committee will know that the task and finish group, the parking task and finish group, did make recommendations, which is that our vision would be that we would charge for short-term parking on the downs, and that would go to a large extent to ameliorate the problem with van dwellers as well. And there would therefore be a necessity for long-term 5-hour parking at this site. So we are doing all of this in proper good faith. We are offering a car park for people who want to arrive on the downs, park there, walk up and spend 5 hours having a picnic or doing whatever they want to do. And I do believe that within the order, the consent order and the Act have persuaded me that we are within our legal remit to do that. And I would urge committee members to allow us to progress this, because otherwise we are going to, you know, in a year or 2 years' time, have people writing to us complaining about the state of the downs because they're not being maintained.
Councillor.
I just want to go back to the point that was made about having options on the table. You know, for me, I'm only seeing one option here. And I must admit, I haven't got the history of task and finish group. But one of the things that's occurred to me is that the Bristol Zoo Gardens is going to be redeveloped, so I'm not too sure what's happening there because it's all a little bit up in the air.
Car parking spaces.
There won't car parking spaces actually
for the inside, yeah.
Inside. So
there's no parking on the road, so I don't think the tariff wouldn't persuade people to park.
I was looking to go with that one team that said there's no parking. It was that, you know, you could have part of the car park set aside as an RPZ for people who want to park in, and that would raise revenue, specific revenue for the downs.
That's not allowed.
No. The RPZs are locked. You can't get over the private.
Any more?
And there'll be no overnight parking. So.
Any more on this? Robert?
Could I just ask, I mean, if it's not agreed that it doesn't become a Downs users car park, what else are you going to do with it? There's no money to develop it, so further down to the original idea that it could be converted, as Paul said, to a nice linear park. Create a nice promenade and walk through down along that wall. But if none of those options are available to us because of finances, then what else can we do with it? It's actually derelict, so we need to do something.
Just 2 thoughts. I just wonder, as this proceeds, there may be opportunities for hedging or tree planting, fringing the car park, and I wonder whether that is something to engage the tree forum on. And then I think the minutes should be careful to use the right phrases about what we've considered in terms of our obligations towards the previous legal agreements, and I forget what phrase Councillor Self used in reference to the imprisonment, but we're not in contempt of court. I think we should just.
Thank you. So I think a proposal to consult with Bristol Tree Forum about more trees compatible with future use as a car park.
And I think protection of the roots. I mean, I know what Mark Ashton is very concerned about is the protection of the roots. So I think we would be very happy to take. I mean, I personally feel very confident with the rest of the committee, but I would be very happy to take guidance from them about ensuring that we didn't overdevelop the site so that trees were damaged in any way. And I think planting extra trees would be a great idea.
Thank you. Are we?
Yeah, actually I didn't really take note of that before the point 4, but I think that covers us, doesn't it? So,
hope so.
Yeah. But I still expect some sort of change.
So we're all done on that. The recommendation is that we approve the proposal that the North Car Park be reopened for pay and display parking for Downs users. and we authorise the council to select a commercial provider and enter into an agreement with that commercial provider to deliver that car park. Are we happy with that?
Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much. Dan's business update. Kevin, that's you.
Sorry, just for convenience sake, because of the way the dams are always done, my instinct is that should go to a vote, because you normally vote.
I thought that's what we just done.
Have you?
I think that was unanimous approval. I was looking around.
Do you wish to go through and actually name your
No, just a show of hands.
All those in favour? Any against? Unanimous. Right. Thank you.
I don't think it is. Yeah, so we need to get that. That needs to be recorded. Thank you.
Right. Yeah. Good thing you've got the Lord Mayor back for the next meeting. Luke, don't you cover the North Car Parks? I think we've done it.
Yeah, okay. So moving on to Dan's pitches, there have been some discussions about the junior team using an area around pitches 13 and 14, but we couldn't agree on financial terms to move forward on. Plus, speaking to Ben, he's had some issues with due from some event spaces and now needs to reinstate those for use for the existing clients that use the grounds. There is discussions going on with the Football Foundation to secure some grant funding to address pitches. It'll probably be circa 12 football pitches. That will last for a period of 6 years. The requirement would be that we need to give a licence to the Downs League over those specific pitches to give them some security to release the funding. So there are discussions with the Downs Football League and also the Football Foundation to progress that funding as well. In terms of trying to move to look at the mini golf proposal, which would look to reinstate the toilet block at the top of White Ladies closest, and then to put a little facility. There's been some delays because originally that was going to conflict with the funder land side, so that's just been revised. And then the potential to look at 3 or 4 paddle courts as well to provide some additional facilities. The idea being that those would be managed by a third-party operator on the basis of a lease or a licence, with the income coming into the Downs Committee. There's also been some initial discussions to try and look at potential for some cricket nets. Obviously going back to the history on the Downs with cricket as well, it would be seen as potentially the ECB might be able to provide funding, and that again would be operated to provide an income similar to Patchway Town Council, where they've got a similar facility. In relation to the Stoke Road changing rooms, there's an ongoing proposals that we're working up to look at how that could be redeveloped alongside cost planning. As referred to earlier, there has been an internal meeting with the SIL officer, and I put the site onto the capital projects list so that we can try and pitch for SIL funding within the council. There again, here there's potential for Football Foundation funding, and beyond that then we'll have to seek other third parties potentially, as Robert alluded to earlier. If we look at the Heritage Lotto funding, then that would be a possible route for additional funding with that proposal. In relation to the sea wall site, the toilet area at the moment, that we've got an architect having a quick look to see what might be able to be produced and done at that point. From some initial discussions, there hasn't actually been any tenant that is prepared to take the building on at this time. The initial feedback has just been that for them to upgrade would be costly versus the business that they might get from such a small space.
Finally, the PT operators. Internally, we've been reviewing, and there's been a wider review in the council, which is ongoing, about finding a way forwards to look at this. So the proposal is to move down a route of licences, and that a PT trainer or PT group would apply and take out a licence for the Downs. Again, this would be earmarked to be in particular areas, so it doesn't affect the football pitches, the event spacing, and some of the other uses, the meadowland, throughout the year. The final charges, as I say, there's a process going on, and coming back to agree what we think those levels would be. And then finally, the proposal for a new concession. At the moment, due to the current lease with the Downs Cafe, that restricts any concessions being 800 yards of Stoke Lane, so there's sort of limited opportunities. So one of those would be to look at a small park, car park, for some sort of mobile concession, and the other potential, if the Seawalls toilet at this point doesn't seem to have a viable way forwards, then to look at something up there as a means to bring in some temporary income.
Thank you, Luke. Any questions for Luke?
Yes, I like the proposal for the mini pitches. It's good to encourage younger people to play sports on the Downs. I've got to say I was really disappointed to see the paddle courts, because I've got an issue with paddle courts in Southweek, David Rogers at this moment, with floodlights and noise pollution. And this is a site of nature conservation. You need to think about those things. The mini golf, I'm not sure about that one either, but I haven't got any details on that one. But so a bit good and bad in my opinion.
Can I respond to that, Luke? Is that okay?
Well, firstly, just to say that the initial proposal on the paddle courts isn't that they'll be floodlit. So it's not, we shouldn't have any light pollution coming from it. So the structures.
But we are talking about today noise pollution, and paddle courts have their own kind of noise pollution in terms that they are continuous, and they, depending on how far sound travels and where they're located, but they can also in themselves be polluting into the noise.
I agree, but also the Downs is an area for sports activities as well. I mean, currently we've got two football.
But does it have to be every single sport? Because, and this, I take it as a company who wants to run this, makes money out of it.
Well, they will obviously be making money, as would we.
There needs to be a further discussion on this one. I'm just expressing my own concern about paddle as a sport project for the Downs.
Anna?
Yeah, I mean, I support Luke's proposals, and I think it's probably important to say that you might not be aware of that we have been up to the Downs to look at the site together and looked at the varying positioning of suggested activities and development. And the sites that Luke is proposing are not sites that have high value, nature value at the moment. And it's almost as though we can divide the Downs into two. So we have the sites that are really important to keep restored for nature conservation, and then sites that could perhaps be used to generate a bit more income. Because clearly, without any income coming in and expanding our income, we're not going to be able to manage the Downs in the bits that really need managing. And I think that's a very important point to make, that we do need to find other sources of income in order to allow the Downs to continue as the very important natural site that it is.
Okay, so the paddle courts in the winter, we've got daylight hours, finishing at 4 o'clock. Before you know it, there'll be proposals to put floodlights on that. But there has been, for example, Headley's Tennis Club, and in Redlands, where there is a sport facility next to Tesco's. And you have floodlight pollution. We were discussing that at this committee. That's much I'm going to say on this one. But I do appreciate we need to generate funding, so it's a predicament.
Well, I think, first of all, can we just clarify, so when you talk about the SIL money that's moved, that's strategic SIL? So it's the other 85%.
That is only in relation to the changes.
To changes, I get that.
And that's because of the broad sort of base of people from various wards that are using as part of the Downs League.
I would imagine that there will be a lot of reservation. First of all, can I just say a big thank you to Luke for the work that you've done so far. You've not been in post for very long, but you've really been getting the wheels in motion. And I've seen some of the architectural work that's been done on some of the designs and things, and you've really been reaching out. So all of that's really great. And I do think that we have to welcome all of the things that you're doing, but equally, as Kaz is saying, we do need to be cautious. And of course, all of these proposals will need a huge amount of scrutiny. And as Anna is saying, you know, if we're going to put a paddle court, I mean, we're never going to have floodlit lights up there because it's never going to be allowed. But if we want to have nets and things like that, that people could do things during the day. Personally, I can't think of nothing nicer than having some nets where we could bring, we've got a very diverse community in this city. We don't see those people up in the Downs, you know, but yet, you know, there's a great history in Indian communities and Pakistani communities, you know, those kids love playing cricket out in the streets all the time. If we have nets, we would be inviting a greater diversity of people up onto the Downs. But it doesn't, everything needs to be done very appropriately. I mean, I'm even afraid to say the words crazy golf because I think it would just blow everybody's minds. But I have actually seen some of the drawings that or the illustrations of things. But we're not talking about big plastic dinosaurs or anything like that. But not any plastic or anything like that. It would all be very, you know, sort of sit in a rustic setting. Somewhere tidily, as Anna's saying, in some tidy, I mean, there's 444 acres. We can position these things properly. And if we do these, you know, income generating and amenity offering extras, and if we do it sensitively and intelligently, it could be a win-win. But, you know, it has to keep coming back to this committee for approval.
Yeah, can I just ask about the personal trainers and the approach to that? Because obviously there's options around that. You could do like a tender for an exclusive operator, but we're kind of looking at sort of a bit more of a free-for-all where anybody can apply for a licence. Do we raise more money in that way, or would we be better doing some sort of exclusive tender?
There's a couple of things. I think the model's been evolving over time, and I think there's been a lot of benchmarking by looking at how it's been implemented in other areas. The idea was that with the licensing per park, that there might be a trainer that wants to operate in 5 or 6 parks across the city, and that he would just buy the licences as per the relevant parks in relation to the Downs as individuals, but potentially that might be a better solution for us than just having a single licence or 2 licences as a maximum capacity.
And then just on the changing rooms, obviously we've been talking about it for a number of years, and no, it's good to see that, you know, progress is being made on it. But I think it ultimately is going to come down to funding, and if we're honest about it, there are funds out there, but it's going to be who the first person is to blink. And I think it will take the council to put some money on the table for the other funders to come in. So I think if there's anything we can do as members on a cross-party basis to get some of that SIL money on the table, to say, look, we'll put, I don't know, 200,000, you know, £400,000 on the table on the basis that other parties put funding in, and if that enables that other funding to come forward, then I think we're probably going to need to act on a whether that's a motion to council or something in the budget this year or something like that. I think we're going to have to do that really, because otherwise I think we'll just be talking about it for a number of years really.
Excellent.
Excellent.
That would be very welcome. Any more on that? Right. You done?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. So moving on to the Downs management report. Ben.
Thanks, Chair. I'm aware there's a few other weighty items on the agenda, so I'm happy to leave the report as stood. Suffice to say, we've been super busy. It felt at the time of writing like autumn was upon us a couple of weeks ago, but now it feels like summer's back for one last bit. But yeah, I just want to make the committee aware, as if they aren't already, how much work goes into clearing up on the downs on a daily basis in all its forms. And when I think back, Robert will know this, the balance between the job used to be cut lots of grass and pick up some litter, and that's completely flipped now. For one reason or another, it's now pick up loads of litter and cut some grass when you get the opportunity to. That's what the job is now, but all we can do as a team working in public space is react to how that space is used. Going back to our talk around the occupations from the traveller community, this year has been pretty problematic from my point of view. But one thing I will say is there's always a clear up to some degree, but the amount of green waste that's been dumped on the downs this year is more than ever. And I would like to, I take Paula's point about the community and the protected characteristics of things, so I'd like to put more onus on the different side of it in a public forum. The people that are paying, the householders that are paying these guys cash, probably not very much money, probably really happy with the cheap price they've got as they wave goodbye to all of this stuff that's taken away from their property, to understand where that's going. It's going to be dumped in a public park and spoil, park users' enjoyment. So, some sort of campaign to make householders aware, not to turn a blind eye, not to just focus on that didn't cost very much, did it? Because this is what's happening. And unfortunately, despite the best efforts and all the other work we've got going on at the same time, unfortunately there are still piles of green waste from our most recent occupation in August. We're trying to get around to it, but the scale of it this year was massive. All members there can see the large list of events that have happened since the last Downs Committee. It's pretty relentless, one after the other. I sign off one event after they're gone, and then the next day I'm signing on the next event. And it's a hell of a lot of work, not just in the period leading up to the event and immediately afterwards, but throughout the year now, working on the 4 event sites on the Downs throughout the year to get them in the best shape they can be to facilitate events. We've had a hay cut and all the normal stuff. The 2 types of football have, Kai will know, Bristol Downs League have begun their season, and the Bristol University Student Union are scheduled to come back on the 25th of this month. A lot of work goes into that. We've also talked in the meeting about the potential usage of the North Car Park area, and it suddenly dawned on me, this is my mistake, maybe I've been ignoring it, but probably not since around 1920, 1930 has a person in my position had to care about that area of land. And all of a sudden we do, all of a sudden it's back on my agenda, and there's quite a lot of work in there to maintain it in the state that it's in, so that any potential plans can be progressed quickly, rather than, oh look, we have like 4 months of cutting back in. So the team will be in there quite a lot over this winter period. And yeah, thanks as ever to FODAG and the Hardy Band of volunteers, the community payback teams. Also again, thanks if you're one of the growing members of the public who we see who take it upon themselves to help us keep this wonderful space that is the Downs looking wonderful. Often now you will see members of the public with their own litter picker, their own black bag, and it's a really strong message, I think. The message, people are up on the Downs and they think we're going to leave all this litter because we know full well someone works here, it's their job to dispose of it, and to a large degree that is true. But if these people see a member of the public essentially clearing up after them, I think that kind of cuts a bit differently. So the more people, we go back to this social construct idea, the more people we see take it upon themselves saying this isn't acceptable, we're doing something about it, I think is a really strong message. And I want to give my thanks to those people that are doing it. We notice it and we appreciate it. 2 other things that have come up since writing this report, if I may, just out of politeness to the committee. generally, we don't tend to trouble the committee with filming requests. They happen all the time, and we have one in particular that just came into us last week, not in time to get on the agenda. So a company is seeking to carry out filming for an advert in Blackrock Quarry. So that's going to mean that space will be out of use for a whole day. We're going to have to put up some signage, maybe connect with the climbing community, I guess, because they're probably not going to want people climbing down into their space whilst filming things. So it's a little bit more tricky than our normal request, but I'm going to, with the committee's approval or just information from the committee, I'm going to progress that with them. There will obviously be income in a normal way from filming. And as Councillor O'Rourke, no, because we had a chat this morning. The good news is we are finally going to take the fencing down from around the reseeded area in Clifton. You know, that fencing's been there looking unsightly for a long time now, so that's good. We've got pretty good grass seed coverage there now, so I'm happy that that's going to be okay. The company that Bristol Council used to inspect rock faces have done some reporting on the rock face of Bridge Road, and I've been asked to fence off pedestrian footway there for some time. So that's happened this morning. Just want to make the committee aware of that. The amount of time that footway is going to be fenced off for or out of use is unclear at this point, but I will keep members updated.
Thank you. Any questions for them?
So I just want to say thank you for the report. Come by down the number 2 bus. It's amazing how quickly areas are reinstated, like the Pride area, for example. So just thank you from me, and also thank you to the Daily Goat Monitor as well for doing that. Looking after the goats.
Well, can I just refer back again to what Ben said about this whole business about the unique SSSI status of the dams, and we are really in danger. I didn't really realise until the summer when I visited when we had an encampment. I didn't realise the amount of industry that's going on behind when the travellers arrive. They set about their business of clearing people's gardens, and then they're just coming up. I saw them with big trailer loads of general detritus and dumping it on the dams. And yet when I wanted to put a wildflower beds in a few places, we had to get an amazing amount of authority to have the right types of seeds so that we didn't interfere with the unique ecological setup in the gorge. And Anna is a great she's always telling us about how delicate this ecosystem is, and it infuriated me to think that well, first of all, people are getting a cheaper deal because the work is being done improperly and they're not paid for the landfill, and we're having that stuff then dumped on the dams, which is damaging the ecosystem. And at the Events and Finance Committee, we did talk about having a really big campaign around Easter, so that we inform people, because what Ben is saying is that people, I didn't really believe this, but Ben and Anna were saying that actually people don't know how to behave in open spaces, and that they don't know that they can't just leave bags of rubbish there, because it's all put away tidily. And we need to get some, a proper information campaign, and we talked about trying to find some local funding to get some sponsors to do that. So we would really want to put together over the next few months a really big campaign for 2 weeks about informing people, and I think that could tie in with having the enforcement days fall in that time. That's something that we would like to maybe come back to the next meeting. And again, thank you, Ben, for all the hard work you do. And I'm sorry that you've got more work in the North Car Park.
It's staggering to hear this. So how prevalent would you say it is? Like, do you think this is happening on a daily basis that people are dumping stuff on?
No, so we're mixing up slightly here. The traveller community, when they come on, they are, whilst they're here, going out to work in the community.
Garden waste you mentioned.
Yeah, so that's coming from the traveller community. The general problem of cars putting onto the grass and having a large-scale picnic and leaving really conscientiously bagging up you know, what they consumed and everything, thinking maybe we've done the right thing here,
Okay, so
and it just gets split completely apart overnight, and it's everywhere. It's like they needn't be bothered by the next morning.
Yeah.
So two slightly different
Sorry,
situations.
yeah, come and go. Fine, thanks.
But I hadn't, until Paula raised that then, I mean, that's why I looked at Anna, it hadn't come into my mind the potential for the introduction of invasive species in all of that stuff that has been, but you
It's
know,
on my mind.
yeah, I mean, yeah, the quantity that's coming, we don't know what's coming, and there is the potential.
I do need to point out that the Downs is not triple S side, the Downs is a site of which conservation interest, and that the overboard is the triple S side, but it's just, and it's splitting hairs, but they are connected as a match.
Well, we weren't allowed to have a pictorial meadow on Christchurch Green because it might interfere with the, you know, because the seeds spread, and yet we're getting all sorts of stuff out of people's back gardens.
The other thing to note is that actually underneath those huge piles of green waste are actually umpteen bags of waste. It's absolutely, it's an absolute health hazard to people using the Downs as well.
All done on that. Ben, thank you very much on all of our behalves. Events? Finance?
Yeah, I think you've got
Read
so just to highlight that since the first report, it has got slightly worse by the deficit increased by 22k from 165 to about 187. Some eviction costs and R&M, potential pay inflation as well, which is still being negotiated.
I beg your pardon, I don't know who you are because I can't see your thing. Could you say your name?
Yeah.
Okay.
And now we've included the cost of the business manager, but that'll be offset by some income sources that we're going to get. Gross income is forecast to be in surplus at 45k. Contributions from towards the development manager role, some bridge trust funding and some filming income. Expenditure forecast pressure of 232k, and that's expected from employee costs, R&M, grounds maintenance, cleaning and the eviction costs. So 1.7 just talks about how we need to close that gap. And John James has already mentioned his report that he's working on to bring to the next events and finance group to look at options. And then you can see on page 2, on table 2, there's a further breakdown of the expenditure.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Yes, Rob.
How has the deficit been growing? Is it just the last 2 times you've had the Downs Committee, or has it been growing substantially every time?
I mean, it's always around this sort of figure, and obviously, I mean, it alters month in the period depending on if something like the eviction costs pop up from we weren't expecting. So that's another reason.
But further back, Rob, 5 years ago, break even.
Yeah.
And 2 things then happened: COVID, complete change in human behaviour, and no parking on the Downs closes, and the income 120k a year?
Zoo.
Sorry, the zoo closed, my apologies.
Yeah, around that, around 100k.
So that's when it all. Thank you. Any questions for Kevin? Anna?
I think a lot of what I wrote down in my little ecological note there has been covered actually today. I mean, you can see what I do from the education report. You can see the sorts of things that we're doing. We've got schools looked in this autumn, which is fantastic. Quite a lot of schools actually, which is really nice for the autumn period. But we won't be able to do that if we don't have a site that's usable to do it. We won't be able to do the engagement. And it's not just obviously schools group, it's not merely the minds, it's the fact that then you can't bring people onto the Downs so that they can use it and learn from it. It's also those people who want to use it as a public amenity and it's absolutely within their right as a citizen of Bristol or the surrounding area to come and do that. If the site's not safe for them to do that, or they feel intimidated, or it's a health hazard or a safeguarding issue. And I think that is quite important to note. And that leads on to the fact that people won't have the site, as I keep saying. They won't have the site if we don't look after it in the much, much longer term. And the committee's responsibility really to the green space that is the Downs and the Avon Gorge, because they are not, you cannot separate them as a landscape. That is the approach to conservation nowadays, and that is the government's approach. It has been since 2011. You don't look at the dams in isolation, and you don't look at the gorge in isolation. They are connected as a biodiverse landscape. What affects one will affect the other. And so the responsibility of the committee, while they're guardians of the dams, really must be to ensure that they are looking after it for future generations, hundreds of years into the future. The Avon Gorge has been a site of important botanical interest for hundreds of years, and people have been aware of that, hence they stopped the quarrying. And then obviously the merchant venturers were able to bring the Downs into a position where it was available for people in Bristol as a green space. This is not a short-term thing. You know, we might be in our jobs for a short period of time, but actually in the longer term, we need to be making sure that we're allowing that space to thrive into the future, and that the Avon Gorge continues to thrive into the future. And I think that's easy to forget when we're only doing something for a couple of years. And I don't think that's highlighted very much. And that's probably the ecological message that I was trying to convey here. And those messages of managing the Downs for the benefit of the Avon Gorge in the long term are written down in the SAC guidance notes. They're written down in the site improvement plan for the Avon Gorge. The Downs is an integral part of that. And it needs looking after and managing well. And I did write down some points at the end there, that very simple things that we can do. And part of that is the campaign that we've been discussing in the Downs Advisory Panel that we'd like to do, and bringing people's awareness up around the city. But part of it is also recognising that the van-dwelling population is causing damage biologically to the site through degradation, and the site will only take a limited time for that, and it will degrade, and it will begin to lose some of its species, and that could have an ongoing impact onto the Avon Gorge and its designations.
Van dwelling and tents. We need to
I wasn't going to mention the
localise it.
tents.
Well, they are part of the same. They're part of the same.
Okay,
They're coming
and
from the same
tents.
place.
I mean, that's the fact that I can't teach in those spaces is irrelevant. That's not really the point. The point is that it's damaging. It's degrading the site.
We have a community of people living at the Downs now, which is completely new.
A number of us have walked the Downs and land in the last few weeks, and we've seen all that evidence, and it's absolutely appalling. We've heard that it takes you an hour and a half with a black bin liner yourself to prepare those spaces for teaching, because of all the stuff you have to clear up.
Yes. That's not so much my point, though. I mean, I can do that, and that's okay. The point is that in the long term, it's just not sustainable. And actually, issues of people living on the site, obviously there's massive issues in Bristol with people living. We know that. But if you want that site to remain a public green space amenity for the people of Bristol to be able to use safely from a safeguarding issue and from a health perspective, and that it's a sustainable ecosystem that doesn't degrade, something needs to be actioned.
I was one of those who had one of these saw three. One was quite a large tent, and two small ones which you photographed in here. What is happening about that? Are we just turning a blind eye to it, or is it?
Anna and I discussed this a lot, as you'd imagine, and Robert also knows this from the past, but it's about the scale that we're facing now, the quantity. There have always been the odd tent on the downs. There always has been. And we would approach that obviously using the Downs bylaws around you're not allowed to camp on the Downs. And the odd tent, we would approach these people, give them the notice, maybe 7 or 8 days later, keep communicating with them or hassling them, if you will. And eventually when we knew they weren't there anymore, if they left the tent, we'd take the tent. Sometimes we'd take the tent and belongings into our depot, in the hope that if they wanted anything and it was gone, they'd find their way into our depot and they could have it back, kind of thing. So that used to, in its way, kind of work okay, because the scale was every now and again there was a tent. But now that scale, much like the van dwelling, the scale now we can't keep up. So there is still a process. When notified about someone in a tent, there's forms that I fill out and give to the occupants with information for them, phone numbers, etc., to ring street organisations and things to where they can be offered, support to try and not have to live in a tent. And so that process would then revolve around people from Streetlink coming out from their central base in the city, and you can imagine they must have hundreds of places to go every night, because we all know how the city is right now in terms of tents, people sleeping in tents. And then they might attend, they might ring me up to get some clarification on where the tent is, and I can show them, and they engage with the occupants. Occasionally I might get an email from them then happily saying, we know that occupant has now left the tent, you can clear up the tent. But the scale now, we're just going backwards. We cannot, our old systems, used to work for the old person in the tent. We're not geared up now to approach what we now face, the scale. As I said, we have a community of people now who live at the Downs permanently, and that is not something we used to have to talk about in managing the Downs. It just wasn't there. Now it is there massively.
There is also an issue that I speak to some of the people living in the vans, and some of them will go there because they like it there. They like to live there.
So that was tents, sorry,
yeah.
That was tents. So we're going to go back into vans. That's different. They're on the highway. We don't have that approach for the people in vans. This is specifically around people in tents.
But just to say that when I have a conversation with some people up there, they'll say to me, "Oh, well, I'm not as bad as the people over there. We're just here because we like working here, and we stay overnight." But a lot of this whole information campaign, I think, will be very useful, because most people think it's not them causing the problem, whereas obviously, it's a classic example, isn't it? Confirmation bias. Of course, it's everybody causing the problem. It's like people who drive onto the Downs when I have a chat with them, or people I go and talk to who are having a barbecue. They all say, "Well, I'm not as bad as somebody else." Actually, and it's almost like it's been permitted. This sort of, and there's lots of different aspects here of the bylaws being breached. There's lots of different elements of it. Yes, I don't really know where I'm going with that one, but I think it's important that most people think they're not the problem, that they absolve themselves of the responsibility. But allowing people to live on the Downs is actually, it's permitting other people to abuse the bylaws, in my viewpoint, from when I speak to people up there.
Robert?
Perhaps I can ask a question of the councillors. Do we know what the progress is on looking for the meanwhile sites? We're talking about meanwhile sites for 12 months, but who's actually trying to identify meanwhile sites? And is there any progress?
There's a couple that have got, the planning department is looking at the, is considering.
I think the paper is coming shortly. The Housing Policy Committee is looking at it, and I think the paper is coming soon.
Yeah, there's a paper coming to do with van dwelling across the city. Obviously, there's already a policy around van dwelling issues. But there's certainly, I've heard that there's 2 different new meanwhile sites that they're looking to progress as planning application. So it's not, there's nothing new. but I don't think that it's just like that, is it? And it wouldn't be even if we had 2 more sites, because
Demand is huge.
yeah, the demand is just too much for it to be. So that to be a kind of, use the word sustainable. Sustainable is having everyone.
I've seen estimates of between 6 and 8, at least 800 people living
In vans.
in roadside vehicles.
Yeah.
Is it going to be meanwhile sites to accommodate?
Well, exactly. That's the point. Is that even if you put additional meanwhile sites in, the council can't. It's not got the capacity, the constraints there that you can't keep.
So if we identify the meanwhile site, certain areas of the city then would be
filled up in 10 seconds.
Yeah.
And probably the Downs is an area where people are going to want to come. Equally, other areas in the city which are better places to stay in, if you remember.
I mean, it's clear if the law was actually enforced, then they could be moved within 24 hours. I mean, if you just enforce the 5-hour parking ban, you could, in theory, solve it, but you're only moving the problem. And so it seems that the identification of meanwhile sites that are up and running, the basic facilities seems critical. Bear in mind, some of these people have been out there 4 or 5 years.
Absolutely, and that's what I just said. But as I also just said, it's not going to fulfil the entire command. So even if you have that, you will still have, as I think, you still have a level of demand on the Downs because people still want to be at that point.
Is there not sort of an acceptance within the council or from the councillors that, well, they're out there and they're out of the way, it's easier to keep them there?
So I don't understand what you mean.
I think it's actually easier to leave them on the Downs where they can be managed rather than actually trying to find a meanwhile site.
I think it's one of the few places where there's actually been enforcement action.
Well, I think if you look at the policy, there's high impact areas and low impact areas. And you're right, the Downs, Parry's Lane is a low impact area. Where, and if you compared that with vans that are right outside, say, a school or in a small street, you can see that one is high impact. And also, what we've, when there was some removals during the summer, I then started getting emails from people who were complaining because the vandalism moved onto their street. Residential streets, saying it is very different. And I mean, what Rob was saying, these meanwhile sites, you probably expect to have 20 or 30 spaces.
It's a partial, it's what I said, there's a partial solution, but also you've got to acknowledge that there's a freedom aspect to it that people may not want to go onto them. So some people will, but some people won't. So that's the difference. And until we actually solve the housing crisis, it's going to continue to be a problem.
And going back to the tents, I mean, there are now people sleeping in tents in Birdcage Walk in Clifton, and it's just, it's austerity and people who've got, mental health problems, addiction problems, there's no support for them. I feel terrible when you're going and you're trying to see about getting people removed from an area, but
is the problem not being exacerbated by the fact that no sort of even basic facilities are provided, like waste disposal, chemical toilet disposal points?
The thing about that would be that you're in a position where if you're the council, if you start putting these things in, exactly to an extent, you're then saying, well, it's taking a position in a sense, and that is the intrinsic difficulty of this conversation, because basically you're trying to figure out a way to house what you said to 800 people.
There aren't 800 people on the Downs.
No, sorry.
No, I'm aware of that, but what I'm saying is that you're talking about high impact on people. I'm talking about high impact on the natural world, which sustains people and provides a green space for the people of Bristol and gives the Avon Gorge its designations, which are international as well as national. So is it a site that is, in effect, really valuable to protect? Or are we going to accept, okay, for the next 10 years, we're just going to accept that it is going to be degraded through people living there?
What I would say is that maybe the policy that was written to what designates a site as high impact or low impact. I mean, I did read it at the time when it came out, but I can't remember, but I don't think that the ecological argument would be factored into that. So what you're asking for...
It's more about nuisance.
Yeah, it's about nuisance.
Yeah.
So I think that that's something that might be a recommendation to come out of this conversation, is that, the committee asks for that policy to be reviewed and for the protection of the natural environment to be added into the high impact, low impact.
So could you
Does that sound like a good idea?
Yeah, I don't see why that couldn't be part of any future
Yeah.
review of the policy,
And we
particularly
all-
it's coming to housing committee.
I mean, we all know that, you know, ecological green spaces support the environment that we live in our biosphere. And if we don't look after those local spaces, then nationally we're losing, you know, we're losing more biodiversity, we're losing more green space, which stabilises our weather patterns, for example. So it's a big conversation about climate change, and most people are now aware of that. Looking after green spaces is actually fundamental to the future of our country.
I'm aware that we are 10 minutes over our allotted time. I wanted to let that conversation run a bit because I was desperately hoping that somebody would break what appeared to be a complete impasse. And actually I think we have got one tiny way forward at least, which is to review the policy. So thank you, Paula, for that. We all recognise it's a hugely difficult conversation. The responsibility of this body is to look after the dams, and in particular the landscape, which is of global significance. So let's take this.
Just make one specific point. Just looking at one of the photographs in Hannah's report, the 25th of August after the massive attack, sustainability festival, looking at this. Can we not impose an obligation on people who are running those events to clear up rather than leaving it to them?
It was a massive attack that left that mess.
It wasn't the people
Running massive attack. It was the irony of the sustainable massive attack event and that waste on the downs at the
That's
same
just
time.
a picture of the traffic.
Oh, right. Oh,
And
sorry.
I
thought it was a
Not
No,
anything to do with
no.
the event.
And I think the point was that Ben's team is very stretched.
When we kick off this piece of strategic planning work, we've absolutely got to try and build this stuff in, and in particular, Anna's very helpful 7 bullet points on page 33. Thank you particularly for your 2-page wake-up call and for your impassioned advocacy. Very important.
You're welcome.
Unless there's any other business, I think we're going to close now.
Can I ask a final question? Still on the same subject. I just wonder if our councillors could tell me who within the council is actually tasked with looking and identifying greenwater sites. Is there anyone?
Housing.
Yeah, Homes and Housing and the Policy Committee. I was invited twice to the chair, who's Councillor Barry Parsons.
Councillor
Barry Parsons.
Thank you. And that's more progress they've made.
Any more on that? Is there any other business? In which case, thank you for your attention. The meeting is closed. Thank you.